Hello there, Bic Benedict here. We're playing Ryse, Son of Rome on the PC on Legendary difficulty, and this is my no damage, no upgrade guide and walkthrough. We're currently on Chapter 5 of 8. It is entitled Edge of the World, and we have some pretty unseemly slow walking at first as we find the path that we need to go on. And there doesn't seem to be a way to speed this up, so you have to go through the motions each time that you restart this chapter, which is pretty unfortunate, but it doesn't take that long in the grand scheme of things, and it gives me a chance to give an overview of what to expect on this chapter. It really isn't too bad. There's maybe one checkpoint that was, I think, a little bit misplaced, but it's not going to cause you any potential problems the way I'll show you how to deal with the part itself. We have a new enemy on this chapter. It's called the Minotaur, and it's essentially it's got the attributes of a heavy where it blocks quite a bit, and the only way to break through its guard is to do charged attacks, or sometimes it will let you get off quick strikes on it, but the thing that they want you to do most of the time is just wait for an opening after perfect deflecting it. Now, one of its attacks is a jumping attack that those axe wielders have, where you perfect deflect, but it doesn't stagger the enemy. It just prevents you from getting damaged, and that's one of the attacks that they have. The other one is a two-hit strike, where the first attack you deflect it, and then the second one you can deflect it as well. And I probably should say perfect deflect, but you perfect deflect it, and then it will give you a chance to land a riposte and have the enemy staggered. And when you're deflecting, you can start immediately inputting the charge if you want to do a charge attack. So you'll definitely want to start queuing a charge attack because go for the most damage. I would say. I usually do like to land heavy charge attacks on the taller Minotaur. These are not the ones that I'm talking about, although these ones too have a jumping attack that you just block and it won't stagger them. So these ones and their taller variants, they do share that move. There's a couple of AoEs on the ground over here, as you can see, but you don't have to be too concerned about it if you just stay away from the area where this guy just jumped down. And you just saw him jump down a minute ago, but we're not doing any more additional fighting. And then as we come up here, we have some running to do, and then I don't mind this chapter too much. I really don't. But some of the scenarios that I just don't appreciate are any time that you're going up to a fight and you have to wait for any particular reason. Most of the time it's a cutscene, which is horrible. The other times, sometimes it's just he'll go up to some place and just kind of stand there, and you locked into place and waiting for him. Oh, here's the heavy guy. There's that attack that I was talking about where he does a two-hit attack, and then you perfect deflect the second attack. And he's quite block happy too, so I end up kind of getting impatient on these guys because they do block so much, and that right there is the only real opening you have to hit them, because it will stagger him and it breaks his guard. So what you can do if you don't want to stand there and wait for that attack, because sometimes he just doesn't do that attack very much. You can actually just spam the charge attacks, and that will go through his guard as well. And then when we come down here, we have another fight over here. This is an unskippable situation. I don't know how many fights in this game, if any, can be skipped. The more I think about it, I don't think they let you skip very much at all. So there's that jumping attack there that he does. And I have my focus gain on it over here, but we don't need to accrue any, as you can know. So the only real thing that ever really is of interest to me is to build up the damage boost. But the actual time in which you're getting a boost is not very significant. So I do have no qualms about using the damage boost, because it is something that has to be earned, and it goes away so quickly as well. So this part is a little obnoxious. Yeah, this part is a little sickening. Now, there's an infinite amount of pilas up here. However, some of these, well, there's one guy in particular that stands behind this structure down here, and he's very difficult to hit. Most of the time, you just don't hit him. And the other enemies are to the left of you, and since you can't switch shoulders in this game and hope to remain behind cover, I really don't entertain this very much, because he's so slow, and getting your block up to try to block the arrows, oftentimes it's just not fast enough for you to do it. So I don't engage that part up there anyway. I will refill my pilas, and I recommend that you do that too. So refill on those, because you can't go back up there once you come down here. So what I try to do on this part is I'll keep the archers off screen as much as possible, and then every time I see the insignia that comes on the screen about the arrow coming over to me, I'll just roll out of the way. So keeping the archers off the screen doesn't pacify them, because as you can see, they're still shooting at you. But look closely at that icon that comes on the screen, that circle, because at first it's just a circle, and then it becomes a different color. It turns into it flashes into that. It just changes, for lack of a better explanation. It just changes, and you can kind of tell when you need to definitely get out of the way. So the first instant you see it, you don't necessarily need to be out of the way, but you need to hurry quickly out of the way of it. So this is a pretty despicable part just because of that, but it really isn't too bad. I mean, just fending off a couple of enemies to one side, dodging a couple of arrows, it's not that bad. This part up here, though, is a pretty well, I don't know if you want to call it taxing. It's not that taxing the way I'll show you how to do it, but I think it's got a misplaced checkpoint over here, because after you do this situation in which you walk up to the edge of this rock over here, you have to watch this. And the reason I never click in the right stick right there is because I don't have that option to do that, because I've remapped some buttons around, and I don't have that remapped to anywhere that I could use it. But we have one shield enemy down here. I think he had a shield, but it doesn't matter too much, because the main thing I wanted to tell you about this is that it's ideal to get the skull icon over both of these enemies, or as close as you can to killing them in sync with one another. Although you can't do a double execution with these two types of enemies, with one tall enemy and one small enemy. It doesn't work. So you'll want to execute these enemies one right after the next, so that once the first enemy is finished off, you can go for the second enemy, and then the remaining, I think, 3 enemies will spawn. It could be just 2, but it's not vital that, yeah, it is 3. It's not vital that you do that, but it could be where you have 4 enemies as opposed to 3. And then once this situation is finished off, you'll go over to the cell, interact with it, and then you'll be going to the next part. But the next part, you don't get a checkpoint until the siege, where the enemies come through the gate. And before that happens, you have significant amount of combat to do, although your teammates seem to help you over here, and you can start throwing these pilas immediately if you like, because there's going to be an infinite cache of them next to the turret. It has another name, but I'm just going to use turret. So what I would recommend is to get the skull icon over a few of these enemies before you jump down, and then as you're running to that cache of pilas, execute them. There is a dual wielder down here, and some of these enemies are going to take up to like 3 pilas to kill. So what I would recommend is not going after a kill necessarily, but just get the skull icon over as many as you can, just given the decreased amount of pilas that we have. And then if you want to, you can finish off these enemies down here, but there's quite a lot of them, and if you end up getting killed down here or make a mistake or anything goes wrong for you, you'll have to do that previous part over, which is obnoxious. So I'm going to run up here over to where this cache that I mentioned was, but this guy was right on me, so I had to deal with him at first. So the dual wielding Minotaur is the same as the dual wielding other ones. The one that we fought in the last chapter, there's nothing different about him. But once it says get those cages open, that means that all the enemies are dead. So your teammates do help you on this part, which is nice. But you're going to get a checkpoint right over here, and you're going to get the option to have archers over to the left or to the right. And you're going to have to make a decision which you want. It potentially doesn't matter very much. Now, I selected the archers to come over to the left because there's a hill that they can come over to the left, so I figured that having them over to the right wasn't the best idea, although it might be even better, so you never know. But once you get on the turret, you have a checkpoint, so it's just a waiting game over here, and you're going to be dealing with up to 2 waves of enemies over here. So start shooting them as quickly as you can using these barrels to help you expedite kills. And I've not had much problems of enemies interrupting me while I've been on this thing and having to do combat, although it's always a concern of mine. Later in the game, I think it's in the last chapter, or maybe it was chapter 3. Well, there's a couple instances when you're on one of these turrets and enemies have no problems coming up to you and interrupting you and hitting you while you're on that. But since you have so much support from your teammates over here, it's unlikely that will happen, although I always have a misgiving that it will happen. But I did get off the turret a little bit too early right there, as you saw, and we had some enemies left that were, I think, archers, but our teammates were able to help us out there. And then we just have this situation here. So all you have to do on these is just hold up, and it goes in the correct way for you. And then when you get to these groupings of enemies, I like to just have everybody block it first and have all of the arrows just deal with all the blocking, and then once it is time to let loose the pilas, let loose those, and then immediately block again. And you really shouldn't have too many problems. The only potential problem that I would imagine people would have, because I've had it quite a bit, is when you're in the blocking phase of it, stopping to block too quickly when there's maybe 1 or 2 archers that are still firing at you. So you have to get comfortable knowing when exactly you need to stop blocking. Usually there's a pretty good grace period of the last one that hits you and you block it, aiming in with the pilas, and then blocking again. It usually goes pretty well. So, and it's all due to that timely grace period they give you, where there's sufficient time to start blocking again. And if you are doing this and you're not doing no damage and you can care less for no damage, that doesn't matter either, because you have a health integrity bar here where it says Roman's health, so you can potentially have several of your teammates get killed and no penalty will befall you. So after that, you're going to get another checkpoint, but if you have any problems on that part, you don't need to worry too much, because there's a checkpoint right before it, so you can practice as much as you can. And then we'll do this next section over here, which is quite difficult. Actually, wait, I may have spoken a bit too soon about which one is difficult. Don't worry though, they're not that bad, these sequences over here, and they're really nicely checkpointed. So when you get to the edge of this rock over here, if you want to throw 4 pylos, you can, because you'll get you can throw those without having to worry about losing out on any, because there's an infinite pile down here. But for these next sections, what's going to happen is that your, well, I'm just going to call them teammates. Your teammates are in cages, and at set times, there's going to be a guy with a torch that comes up to those cages and tries to burn the cage and the people in there. The best thing to do, and I think the most manageable and makes it the most fun, is when you do get the indication that one of those enemies is coming, just let him go up to the cage, and you'll get the red icon over him, and you'll get a chance to just run up to him and execute him. There's also a water execution too that I don't think I've been able to do. I'd like to do it, but you know, you can't always control the circumstances. But yeah, as much as these can be potentially difficult, what happens is when you do potentially get distracted by your teammates telling you that that enemy is coming with a torch to burn your men, don't worry about it, because I don't think it's possible to not have your teammates take some damage over here. And even if it is, we're not going for that at all, so it doesn't have any bearing on what we're doing. It just makes it a fun thing rather than a tedious and arduous thing, you know, potentially. Yeah, so this is the second scenario, and I don't know if you've got a checkpoint right now, but some of these fights end prematurely. You get the indication to open the cages and there's still enemies around, so it's kind of strange. But here's a corpse that you can loot and get another pila, and this is the longest section that's coming up over here. What you can do is you can throw a couple of pilas from the outskirts of the fight, and there's a corpse that you can loot, and that will replenish 2 of your pilas if you choose to throw 2, and then max out again to 4. And at set times, again, there's going to be one guy with that torch coming up to burn the cages. But trust me, if you try to go after him with all of the other shenanigans that are constantly going on around you, you've got your teammates all over the place, you've got enemies all over the place, you've got enemies doing different timed attacks, and if you try to go for the guy with the torch and kill him, he's got a fair amount of health that you have to, you know, go through to kill him. But I'm telling you, the easiest way is just to let him go right up to the cage, and you'll always get the red execution prompt, and it doesn't go away either. So unless you're setting down the controller and going into a different room and letting, you know, all havoc go loose, this is not something that's going to give you that many problems, I would imagine. Just bear in mind that you're going to have one taller enemy that you'll have to deal with amongst all of the other ones. But it's pretty clear when the threat is coming, when the torch bearer is coming, because your teammates will tell you, and you'll get that indication on the screen, that red arrow. So here's another one. So yeah, just let them go right up. And these really could have been horrendous, you know. But they managed to do it, and they managed to make it fun and not overly difficult, you know, because there's enough going on all at once for you to deal with. But if you want to try to do that and not have any of your teammates taking any damage. I'm not sure, because as long as you don't cause him to burn the cages, I don't know why people are taking damage in the first place, but it's not something we have to concern ourselves too much with. I generally like to save my Pylas on that section because there really is not much need to use them. And that's basically all of those sections done, and you're going to get another checkpoint up here as we finish the last stages of the chapter. The last phase of this fight actually are quite easy because this boss doesn't have a big repertoire of moves. What he'll do is he'll do one hit, and you can perfect deflect it and go in for your attacks. Or he'll do 2 hits. The first one, just like the others, is you perfect deflect it, but you don't get anything. And then the second one, he recoils, and then you can go in for your heavy attacks. That's all he does, and it's a 2-phase fight broken by a nice checkpoint. And I have to applaud them for not putting other enemies with this boss fight, because a lot of other games do that kind of nonsense. But at this point, he's going to come after you, and there's just quick time events. It's yellow, blue, and blue. And these quick time events, it's very difficult to get the legendary hit on him. But this is approximately where the checkpoint is. And again, it's all the same, all more of the same. If you don't have the timing, you'll accrue it. That's Glot in a nutshell. It's quite easy. You don't even need to put the damage on. He's quite simplistic boss for you to play around with, because he's just like the other Minotaur chiefs, which is kind of sad. But anyway, that's been chapter 5. Chapter 6 is a really nice chapter, but it has some difficult parts on it. Anyway, I will see you in chapter 6, and until then, please take care.